Hey all, it's Seth. As you can see over my shoulder, I have a Punisher action figure now. The first of many decorative pieces coming to the soon-to-be Marvel room. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and also talk about the Lord of Lies himself on this joyous day where we celebrate the Fools of April. Loki Laufeyson. As we said before. Lord of Lies, God of Mischief, and now even the King of Jotunheim. Without further ado, let's begin. Born as a frost giant on the world of Jotunheim, Loki is actually the biological son of two frost giants in particular, Laufey and Farbati, which, fun fact, in the Marvel universe, Loki's parents are actually the same unlike Thor's, whereas Loki's parents, his father being Laufey, the king of Jotunheim, and his mother Farbati, the queen of Jotunheim, whereas in the actual version of the myths, same parents, but just it's a little bit different. In the actual version of the myths, his dad is actually Farbati and his mom is Laufey. It's a little bit of a different twist, but at least you know that Loki's parentage stayed somewhat the same in the Marvel version. But back on track, like I said, Loki was born on Jotunheim to frost giant parents, or, just essentially giants in general. But when he was born, they noticed that he was much smaller than the other giants. And, I mean, we know how tall Loki is. We saw him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that he's like anywhere between like 6 feet to maybe even 6'3", whereas the giants of Jotunheim are all anywhere between maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, maybe even taller than that. And because of that, his parents actually cast him out. Literally the day he was born, they noticed how small he was and just decided, that's it, we're not having him. However, around that same time, there was a war that happened between the Aesir or Asgardians of Asgard and the frost giants of Jotunheim. It ended where it is that there was a somewhat easy peace between the two worlds, and that's when Odin found the baby Loki. He found him and decided, I'm not going to let this child die in the wilds of Jotunheim. I will take him back to Asgard and I will raise him as my own. And that's exactly what he did. And because of that, Loki ended up not just with a new home, but he ended up with a family of his own that would actually take care of him. Ended up with at least 3 other brothers and 2 sisters in the process. As we know from what Freya told Thor in Thor the Dark World, him and Thor had always cast such large shadows throughout their lives that when Loki was brought into Asgard, being a very small boy, actually just an infant, that she wanted Loki to have something that was his, that he could call his own. While Thor and Odin were doing their own thing, Freya and Loki would at least have something that they could do together. And I mean, it was a very great gesture that, that she was looking out for, at least one of her boys while one of them was doing something else. And, like I said, the intention was good, that she wanted to make sure that Loki had something that was there that he could call his own. But I guess that it worked a little too well, because just Loki being, the master of magic in Asgard, he decided to use his magic for causing a little bit of mischief everywhere. And I think maybe that's what it led towards him just, causing all these tricks and mischievous pranks just because he wanted people to know him. And I think, being an outsider looking in, you want to try and fit in no matter what. Believe it or not, it wasn't even just the people of Asgard who Loki managed to piss off with his mischief. He also managed to acquire the wrath of gods and goddesses from other pantheons, such as the Greco-Roman pantheon. In particular, he managed to piss off the king of Olympus himself, Zeus, so much to the point that sometime in the 1940s, Loki actually took over Hades' spot as the ruler of the Greco-Roman underworld. Now, it's not exactly specified how long Loki was there for and how long he stayed, but he was eventually allowed to leave the Greco-Roman underworld and go back to Asgard, which, as we all know, eventually led to Loki becoming an enemy of not just Thor, but the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy as a whole. And now let's move over to Loki's children. Yes, Loki actually does have children. 3 of them I know for a fact that stand out the most, with a giant by the name of Angrboda. Let's start with the first one that we actually met back in Thor Ragnarok. The obvious being Hela, the goddess of death, queen of hell. Yes, believe it or not, Hela actually is Loki's daughter, both in the comics and the myth. For the most part, her personality and definitely her costume were exactly the same. Her fighting style, everything, that was Hela. Just the only difference with it being that instead of it being that she's the daughter of Loki and Angrboda, she's actually the daughter of Odin, making her the sister to Thor and Loki. It's unknown if who her mom is. It could have been Freya, but then again, it could have been another character named Carnella, who we will talk about in a later video. But for right now, just know that originally Hela was Loki's daughter, not Odin's. And then another one of Loki's children that we met again in Thor Ragnarok being Fenrir, the Lord of Wolves. Yes, the giant wolf from Thor Ragnarok was again another one of Loki's children that he had with the giant Angrboda. Of course, in the movie universe, he was just a really big Asgardian wolf, who, after his fight with Hulk and fell off of the waterfall, it's unknown whether or not if Fenrir died at the end, because truthfully, it's an unwritten rule in filmmaking that unless you actually see a character die in a movie, that doesn't mean that they are dead. So, yes, we saw Fenrir fall off of the waterfall in Thor Ragnarok, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's dead. For all we know, Fenrir could have just made sure to hold his breath long enough until he found another world or someone to just take him in, and he could still very much be alive, just somewhere throughout the universe. And then let's move over to Loki's third child that he had with Angrboda, which is a giant, believe it or not, a giant snake by the name of Jormungandr, also known as the Midgard serpent. Jormungandr is said to be so massive in the myths that he was actually able to wrap himself around the world to the point where he could actually meet his tail, like the very tip of his tail, and bite down on it. Not hard, but just enough so that way he could kind of essentially act as like a big giant set of rings for the planet, kind of like how Saturn has those rings around itself. And well, like I said, we haven't seen Jormungandr yet, but that doesn't mean he doesn't exist in the MCU. For all we know, he's probably just in here on our world, just sleeping somewhere in Scandinavia, or he's just on another, actually on any of the other 9 realms, or just somewhere throughout the multiverse. Not the multiverse, the universe. My bad. He does exist throughout the multiverse. It's just we don't know where he is in the MCU. And well, then we have to talk a little bit about Loki's 4th child, not with Angrboda, but prepare to have your minds blown on this one. Because Loki actually did the deed with a horse. When you think so much about mythology and legends and you really do a deep dive into it, you realize it's so just really weird. But that's what makes it interesting. And not only that, but I mean, like I said, the weird part was how it is that he, after he had that horse, he gave said horse to his father as a present. I don't even want to imagine how that conversation went. Trying to present your father with a horse that's actually yours. And by yours, I mean it actually is a part of you. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, we saw Sleipnir in the very first Thor movie. He was the 8-legged horse that Odin rode on, when he was getting Thor, Loki, Sif, and the Warriors 3 out of Jotunheim. But it's unknown if Sleipnir is alive or not. I want to say he probably is, but we won't know until, we see either the 4th Thor film or in a later, Marvel movie. But I digress. For now, believe it or not, in both the comics and in the MCU, Loki actually is trying to make amends for his past deeds. He's even got a new title in the comics as well, 2 in fact. He's no longer the God of Mischief, he's now officially the God of Storytelling, and he's now officially the King of Jotunheim. Him and Thor are actually a lot closer now because of it being that they both took on roles as kings. Thor in Asgard, Loki in Jotunheim, and they're actually a lot more closer now than ever. So whether it's the comics or the movies, it's nice to see that Loki's at least trying to make somewhat of peace for what he did before and turn over a new leaf. Now, before I close out today, let me leave you with this, true believers. If you're going to go out and do a few prank with your friends or family or whoever you think, keep this. In a day and age where it is that we need a laugh now more than ever, when going out to do pranks, make sure to keep it fun, but also keep it safe. Because if you take it too far, not only will you end up hurting someone you desperately, you really care about, you also lose yourself along the way. And then everyone will just get hurt. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all things Marvel. Until then, remember always, Excelsior.